Scammers use phone numbers to drain over $1 million from 3 people's bank accounts. I hate to say it, but scammers are getting smarter and their tactics are more ruthless than ever. Do you think your money is safe because of two-factor authentication or trusted banks? Think again. You could wake up one day to find your bank account emptied and your savings gone forever. It literally only takes a few minutes. So coming up, you'll see how a husband and wife who spent years building their dream retirement watched their $700,000 savings disappear in just an afternoon. A man who boarded a flight ready for a peaceful few hours in the air, only to land and discover $280,000 drained from his bank account. And a tech consultant, someone who was careful with every penny, helplessly saw half of his life savings vanish from one of the largest banks in the country. These devastating losses could have been prevented with 2 simple changes. Changes I recently made for myself that you can easily implement to protect what you've worked so hard for. Oh, by the way, speaking of changes, you're gonna love this. I created a free checklist for protecting yourself against identity theft. It doesn't just stop at freezing your credit report with the big 3 bureaus like Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, because for a lot of people, that's not enough. It takes a step further by uncovering the secret bureaus most people don't even know about, like Check Systems, LexisNexis, and Innovis. These lesser-known agencies hold critical data that scammers love to exploit, so locking them down is a no-brainer. Inside, you'll find 10 easy step-by-step instructions with clickable links everywhere to secure your accounts and block SIM swap scams before they even start. You'll also learn how to protect your tax records with an IRS PIN and stop payday loans or unauthorized bank accounts from being opened in your name. With this checklist, you'll be able to secure every possible vulnerability and take back full control of your digital life. No hoops to jump through. Just click the link below one time to get instant access for your free checklist. Now, this victim went through a doomsday scenario, but there's so much we can learn from what happened to them. So Dan Clark's life took a sudden and devastating turn on what seemed like an ordinary day. A hardworking Tampa business owner, Dan had built a comfortable life, saving diligently to secure his family's future. But in the blink of an eye, his financial stability was stripped away by a crafty scam called a SIM swap. It preyed on the cell phone he relied on every day. Dan was the kind of person who planned for the future. With over $700,000 in savings, he and his wife had been looking forward to their retirement for years, even making plans for vacation homes. His financial accounts were secured, or so he thought, by two-factor authentication and trusted large financial institutions. But this sense of security was shattered one afternoon when Dan glanced at his phone and saw the alarming words, "No service SIM card." At first, he assumed it was a network glitch. He restarted his phone and even tried swapping the SIM card into another device, but nothing worked. Frustrated, he reached out to his carrier for support. Now, unknown to Dan, the hackers had already taken control of his phone number. While Dan scrambled to understand what was happening, scammers moved quickly. They had executed a SIM swap. That tactic allowed them to take over Dan's phone number by convincing his carrier to transfer it to their device. With control over his number, they bypassed two-factor authentication codes and accessed his financial accounts. And within hours, Dan's entire savings, more than $700,000, was completely drained from his bank accounts. Dan said, "I lost everything in a matter of a few hours." When he contacted his bank, he was told that the withdrawals appeared legitimate because their correct verification codes had been used. Even the FBI, once involved, confirmed that tracing and recovering those funds was nearly impossible. Dan was left in disbelief, wondering how this could happen despite following standard security protocols. The emotional toll on Dan was huge. He described feeling violated and powerless, watching the fruits of his lifetime of hard work disappear in an instant. His trust in technology and even his bank was shaken to his core. Now, this next victim proves that even if you're financially savvy, cautious, and conservative with your money, you can still get robbed using this scam. For Jeff, an average day turned into a nightmare when he noticed unusual notifications from his bank. A seasoned tech consultant and a homeowner in Chatsworth, California, Jeff was known for being careful with his finances. But again, in just a few hours, he watched helplessly as half of his savings, $21,000, vanished from his bank account. Jeff was meticulous about securing his accounts. His savings sat in a trusted Bank of America account protected by two-factor authentication through SMS. But what Jeff didn't realize was that the very security he relied on was about to fail him. It all started when Jeff's phone suddenly lost service. At first, he thought it was a minor glitch with his carrier, again, Spectrum. But when he tried calling his bank for help, he couldn't connect. Panic set in as alerts about password changes and unauthorized logins filled his inbox. By the time Jeff reached Bank of America through another phone, the scammers had already drained $21,000, half of his account balance. Yet again, these criminals had executed a SIM swap using Jeff's personal information, his name, address, and phone number, to convince Spectrum to transfer his number to that new phone. With access to his SMS messages, they intercepted the two-factor authentication codes and accessed his bank accounts. Despite his quick reaction, Jeff's money was already gone, leaving him frustrated with both Spectrum's security and his bank's reliance on outdated procedures. And Jeff said it felt like a complete violation, reflecting on his experience. While Bank of America eventually reimbursed the $21,000 after media inquiries, Jeff's trust in both carrier and bank was damaged beyond repair. Now, another victim's experience opened my eyes to a chilling reality. Your bank could be sending you fraud alerts, but you might never see them. Imagine stepping onto a plane, forced to think about your travel plans for a few hours, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing on the ground. That's exactly what happened to a Florida resident who, mid-flight, became the victim of a devastating SIM swap scam. By the time the wheels touched down, their phone was compromised, their bank account drained of $280,000, and their financial world turned upside down. The victim was an unsuspecting individual going about their day, boarding a flight, and expecting nothing more than a routine trip. Little did they know, scammers had already executed a SIM swap, taking control of their phone number. With the victim in the air and completely unreachable, the scammers bypassed SMS-based two-factor authentication and accessed their bank account without being noticed. The stolen money, $280,000, represents years of hard work and careful savings. The victim landed, turned their phone back on, and realized something was terribly wrong. Their phone wasn't working properly, and by the time they pieced together what had happened, the damage was already done. The scale of the theft was staggering. The scammers moved quickly, transferring the funds and using the stolen money for personal expenses. The victim's sense of safety was shattered, and they were left to pick up the pieces themselves. However, unlike many cases where criminals vanished without a trace, the scammers, which were Thomas Simmons and his accomplice, were sloppy. Their trail of financial transactions and personal luxuries led investigators right to them. Both Thomas Simmons and his accomplice were arrested. Charges of grand theft and money laundering were filed against them. Now, while the arrest brought some measure of justice, the story serves as a chilling reminder of how easily scammers can exploit vulnerabilities in mobile security and financial systems. For scammers, their greed led to significant legal consequences, but for the victim, the journey to financial recovery remains uncertain. The stolen funds may never be fully recovered, leaving a lasting impact on their bank account and their peace of mind. And listen, imagine locking your front door but hiding the key under the doormat. That's essentially what SMS-based two-factor authentication has become, a false sense of security that leaves you vulnerable to anyone determined enough to find the key. Take Dan Clark's case, for example. It all started with a simple notification, no service and SIM card. Within hours, scammers executed that SIM swap, intercepting the SMS codes meant to secure his bank accounts. And then with access to those codes, they drained $700K, his entire life savings. The same weakness in SMS-based two-factor authentication allowed scammers to rob Jeff for $21,000 and the third victim for $280,000 while they were mid-flight. These weren't random accidents. They were calculated attacks targeting a system that was supposed to keep their account safe. And here's the harsh truth. Scammers don't need to hack your account. They just need to control your phone number. Once they have it, just bypassing SMS-based security is as easy as intercepting a text message. This technology is just outdated now. After hearing stories like these, I realized I couldn't take chances with my own security. That's why I switched my personal bank account to using Authy for two-factor authentication instead of SMS. I already had the app installed because I use it with a lot of my business accounts. So next I opened my banking app and updated my security settings. I disconnected SMS-based codes and enabled app-based two-factor authentication. The process was really quick too, but the sense of relief was huge. That small 30 seconds of effort gave me peace of mind I didn't know I was even missing. Now, the solution is clear for me. Upgrade to app-based two-factor authentication tools like Google Authenticator or Authy for all of your critical accounts. These apps generate unique codes directly on your device, making them impossible to intercept remotely. Now, the second problem lies in the very companies we rely on to protect our phone numbers, and that's our mobile carriers. While they play a critical role in safeguarding our digital lives, their systems often prioritize convenience over security, leaving the door wide open for scammers. For Jeff, this vulnerability cost him $21,000. Scammers tricked Spectrum, his carrier, into granting them control of his phone number. With that control, they intercepted his bank's SMS codes and cleaned out his account. So the root issue, many carriers rely on outdated and easily manipulated identification processes. A smooth-talking scammer can convince a customer service rep to transfer control of your account. Once that happens, it's game over. So what can we do? What we can do is add a PIN or password to our mobile accounts. Most carriers allow you to set this extra layer of security up, requiring verification before any account changes are made. Some, like AT&T, even offer wireless account locks, which prevent any changes without your explicit approval. Setting up my AT&T account lock was simple. I used the My AT&T app, clicked a few buttons, slid to confirm, and my account was locked, just like that. If your carrier doesn't provide these protections, it's worth considering switching to a new one that does. It's honestly mind-blowing when you stop and think about it. Two completely separate companies, a phone carrier and a bank, both infiltrated in a matter of minutes. These are institutions we trust implicitly, organizations built to safeguard some of the most personal aspects of our lives, and yet scammers manage to break through both of those at the same time. It's like watching the unthinkable happen in real time. What's even scarier is how this exposes just how fragile these systems are. We assume these companies are untouchable, protected by layers of security that no one could possibly bypass. But in reality, a few bits of personal information in the wrong hands, a clever scammer, and suddenly those walls we thought were unbreakable come crashing down. It's a real eye-opener, isn't it? A reminder that these systems we rely on so heavily, our phones and our banks, our financial security, are nowhere near as impenetrable as we like to believe. And here's the kicker. This could happen to anyone who hasn't made the update yet. You don't have to be careless or irresponsible to become a victim. Scammers are relentless, and once they set their sights on you, they can exploit every weak link in the chain. This is really a wake-up call, not just about scammer sophistication, but about the vulnerabilities we've all been conditioned to overlook. And let's face it, scams like this are showing up everywhere these days. In fact, I recently covered a shocking case where Chase Bank allowed more than 100 complete strangers to become authorized users on customers' credit cards without their knowledge. It's a wild story, but more importantly, I'll show you how to spot this kind of fraud before fake cards start arriving at your front doorstep. Click on the next video to learn the best way to protect yourself. You don't want to miss it, and thank you for watching.